let's talk to Andrew Montford, Director of Net Zero Watch, because it turns out that 5 water firms are going to be allowed to raise their bills between 1% and 5%, which is not particularly green, I wouldn't have thought. But also, we've got some other news. Winter blackouts are coming apparently to us because the risk is getting very, very high. Andrew, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
So, my apologies for the long preamble there about Keir Starmer's walk in the woods with Gary Neville. I mean, I don't quite know what they're doing and what they're playing at. But listen, it looks great, doesn't it? A winter blackout is coming, and we probably have to be prepared.
Yeah, I mean, I think National Grid, Neso, we should call them now, are trying to put a positive spin on it. I think they're saying that things are a little better than they were last year. But the thing I think people need to understand is that Neso, when they're assessing whether we've got enough power stations, they assess things against an average cold spell. Now, the question then is, what happens if we get a really cold spell? The kind of thing we saw in sort of 2010 and 2011, 2012, we had days, weeks of really, really cold weather. And I think there is a major concern as to whether the UK grid could cope with that any longer. We have a lot of really old power stations that essentially probably won't run for 2 weeks flat out. Now, they'll probably just break down. So if that happens, I think we are looking at major blackouts. You know, we could lose half the country. Now, if that happens when temperatures are, you know, -8, -10, as they were in 2010, people are going to die. And it's that serious. And I think we need politicians to start asking questions about this. You know, ask Ed Miliband in Parliament about whether the grid can cope with this, because I don't think anybody's taking this seriously enough.
No, I don't think they are, because, you know, it is quite an actual, you know, sort of fragile thing, isn't it, the national grid? You know, because when you do get close, as we have done quite often in recent months, to a blackout, or to a brownout, as they used to call it in New York when I lived there, you know, you don't really understand what that's like until it happens. And when it does happen, you literally have no control over it.
Absolutely, and you know, we saw this in Spain recently, where you know, they lost the whole country, the whole grid went down, and people died. Now, people were, you know, I think 11 people died, you know, mainly because they had medical devices that relied on electricity, and the backup supplies failed. But if they hadn't have fixed that fault in Spain within, you know, the sort of the 24-hour period in which they did, things were going to get very serious. You have to understand that in a lot of the country, you wouldn't have any water supplies. Okay, Now I'm okay where I am. My water supply is gravity fed, but all over the south of England, you need electric pumps to get you the water. Now, if you don't have water, you're getting into serious problems. You're getting into disease, you know, all kinds of things.
Right.
So, you know, this is a very serious problem, and the grid is becoming more unstable. You know, I hear things. You know, I know people, you know, who work in the grid, and the grid is probably not able to cope with a very cold spell. But there's also major concerns about whether it can get through the very low demand levels in summer. I think next summer is going to be quite interesting as well. This is just not on the radar in Westminster, I think, and I think it should be. And you know, I would like to see Claire Coutinho asking some very hard questions of Ed Miliband.
Yeah, but isn't the problem with the Tories, though, that they're pretending that they've now converted to not so keen on net zero as they used to be, but they still kind of have got a history of having done all sorts of things, terrible things, which have put us very, very firmly in the net zero firmament.
Yeah, they have a very difficult marketing job, don't they? You know, they are saying the right things now. You know, Kemi said we're not going to do net zero at least by 2050, and they're going to do away with a huge chunk of the subsidies and the carbon taxes.
Yeah.
You know, that's great, but I think there is a question as to whether voters are going to say, yes, we'll give you another chance, or whether they're going to, you know, stick with reform, as the polls suggest. You know, they have shifted already and are going to give reform a chance. And, you know, I think to the average man in the street, there are questions to be asked on both sides. You know, have reform got the policy making machine to actually deliver, and do we trust the Conservatives if they did it? And you know, I don't know the answer to that, but you know, it's quite clear that Ed Miliband is taking us down the road to disaster. Really,
Yeah,
it's
no question
economic
at all.
disaster and it's electricity grid disaster.
Yeah, absolutely right. And meanwhile, we said the breaking news this morning is that water firms will be given permission to actually raise their bills even more. Andrew Montford, thank you very much indeed, Director of Net Zero Watch. This.